Hello and welcome to another episode of the Aim High podcast. I'm your host, Ben Shin, and today's guest is Arlene Hong. Arlene is a C-suite executive and legal officer with over 25 years of experience. At J.Crew, she helped lead legal teams through a successful $432 million IPO. At Amazon, she led the legal team for the $12 billion North America consumer softlines business, and at Full Beauty Brand, she managed all legal matters for the $1 billion multi-channel goods. Her most recent role was Chief Legal Officer and Executive Vice President at Equinox, handling legal and risk management functions for some of the world's most influential lifestyle brands. Thank you, Arlene, for being on the Aim High podcast today.
Oh, well, Ben, thank you for having me. I am honored to be on your podcast, and I'm really impressed that you've launched this podcast and by the caliber of other guests that you've had on your podcast. So happy to be here.
Well, thank you. So to start off, we'll first talk about your childhood and upbringing. Because this podcast is centered around being an Asian American leader in business, it is important to first understand each guest's childhood and upbringing as an Asian American. Ideas instilled within you from your parents and environment may have helped you become successful in where you are today. So could you explain your childhood situation growing up? Where did you grow up? Did you have any siblings? And what were family dynamics like?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. But before I dive in, Ben, I would love to ask you a little bit about your family and your upbringing. So where did you grow up? I'd love to learn just a little bit more about you before we spend an hour together.
Yeah, of course. So I was born in Chicago, and then we moved to Cleveland, and then I've been growing up in the Boston area for the rest of my life. I have two younger sisters. Both of my parents are Korean. Their parents immigrated to the U.S. when they were adults. So yeah.
Okay. Can I ask whereabouts in Boston did you grow up?
Oh yeah, so I grew up in Cambridge, and then now I currently live in Belmont, Massachusetts.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up in Weston,
Oh,
so
that's really close.
it is very close. I have
Yeah.
a feeling that maybe our parents might know each other. As you know, Weston is a very, very small town.
Yeah.
So I grew up with two siblings. An older brother who's 2 years older than me and went on to become a medical doctor, and an older sister who's 4 years older than me and went on to become an investment banker. Probably, as you've heard many times on your podcast, Ben, education and hard work were critical priorities for us growing up. In fact, one of the main reasons why my parents moved to Weston in the first place was because it had one of the best public school systems in Massachusetts. So it even
Yeah.
dictated where we lived. But I will say that my brother actually left and went to Phillips Exeter
Oh wow.
high school, and me and my sister went through the public school system in Weston. So we were raised to study hard, to work hard, to do well in school, to get good grades, to get into good universities or colleges,
Yeah.
and to have quote unquote successful careers.
Yeah. And how did your parents' experiences influence your perspective on work and success?
Well, my parents themselves were highly educated. So my father went to Seoul University and then came to the United States and got his PhD in electrical engineering from University of Michigan. My mother graduated top of her class from Ewha University, along with her twin sister, and then came to the University of Michigan, where she met my father and got a master's degree in pharmaceutical chemistry. And so both my mother and my father came from well-known business families. Both of their fathers were CEOs of large businesses in Korea. And so that was part of their DNA as well, is just, working hard, going to good school, getting higher education. That was never a question in our household, whether or not we
Yeah.
were going to get graduate degrees. And then, eventually having some type of professional career.
Yeah, that's definitely a theme among all the guests, like you mentioned, was just the emphasis on hard work and education, especially.
Yeah, I can. Have you actually had a guest who has said anything different? I mean, it's,
Yeah, like I might have had like one, but they like always, it's always an emphasis on education and the importance of just going to school, doing well in school. So that's just like a very common theme. So,
Yes, it is. And so I have two children, two boys in seventh and ninth grades, and I take a slightly different approach.
yeah.
Just having gone through my own experience, not to say it's not hugely important, but it is not the only thing that is important in my view. So,
Yeah.
but I'm grateful because, had my parents not pushed us so hard to study and to go to good college and to work hard at a career, then, I would not have been able to have the career that I've had so far.
Yeah. And did you feel any pressure to conform to certain expectations, either from your family or from the broader community, like at school? And how did you handle that?
Well, definitely from my family,
Hmm.
pressure to do well, to attend a good university, to have a successful career. I think because I am the youngest of my siblings, and my brother had already gone on to medical school, my sister had gone to business school and went into banking, that law was kind of the one path that was left for me. And so I could tell my parents were just, pushing me in that direction.
Yeah.
Law school also happened to be incredibly popular at the time I was graduating from college. There were so many people going to law school. I
Yeah.
can't say that I knew in college that I wanted to become a lawyer, but I think my parents were kind of secretly ingraining it in me since they already had a doctor and a banker. They're like, well, we just want to round it out and get a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm grateful to them. I have no regrets. But it's not something that was an aha moment for me at all of
Yeah.
uh, going to be a lawyer, and that's my path that I'm going to apply to law school. In fact, when I was applying to law school and I was like, oh, I'm not sure, I might go to business school, I might take some time off, my father said, well, just try 1 year of law school, and if you don't like it, you can quit.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that sounds reasonable. And in retrospect, I was like, that's brilliant because the first year of law school is by far the hardest. And so if you survive your first year of law school, you're like, well, I'm not going to quit now. So,
Yeah. And was there anything in your childhood, like any moments where you were like, I do want to be a lawyer? Or was it always like pressure from your parents as like the youngest to be like, oh, you need to be a lawyer?
I really wish I could say that, there's a lawyer in my family that I looked up to, or, I like to negotiate and argue or debate, but I can't say that there was anything in particular that, or any seminal event that really led me down that path. Again, it was
Yeah.
probably just a combination of, it's kind of, I had a good time at college. I had a
Hmm.
very good time. And in fact, the town that I grew up in, which is not far from where you live now,
Yeah.
is not very diverse, or certainly wasn't when I was living there. And so we were one of only three Asian families in the town. So I
Wow.
essentially grew up thinking that I was not Asian.
No.
And then when I went to college, I was all of a sudden was surrounded by so many Asians, so many other Asians, including Nancy Pack, who you had on your podcast.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, who are all these people? Like, they're so weird. But I would say over time, they became my closest friends and still are to this day. And that's really when I really started to better understand and appreciate my heritage.
Hmm.
But during those college years, again, I studied hard, but I also had a good time.
Yeah.
And I was going to school at Columbia University in the city. And so we were spending a lot of time in the city too.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I wasn't, to be perfectly honest, really focused on what I was going to do in terms of my next step. And so at the time I was graduating law school, it seemed like okay.
Yeah.
And I went ahead and I went, and, my path followed from there.
Yeah. And as we move on to the second part of the podcast, talking about education and early career, how did you get your first job after law school as a corporate associate at a law firm?
So I started my career after law school at a mid-sized law firm as a corporate associate. And so I had been a summer associate there the year before.
Mm.
And so I returned there after I graduated from law school, and I did corporate work. I was there for a few years and decided that I wanted to do some of the more heavyweight, bigger, sexier M&A deals and corporate work. And so I moved to one of the big global firms, Proskauer. And I was there for a number of years before I went in-house. And so I think it made sense for me because I also ultimately wanted to go in-house, and I knew that.
Yeah.
I wanted to, I didn't love the law firm life. It was long hours, it was grueling, it was a tough environment. You're always at the client's beck and call. I wanted to be part of a business team.
Mm.
But I knew that in order to get there, that a step that would help me would be being at one of the big global law firms, and so I did make that jump. Spent a few years at Proskauer before going in house.
Yeah. And what did your responsibilities look like at Proskauer?
Oh, at Proskauer, I worked primarily on M&A deals, but I also did financing transactions, IPOs, kind of ran the gamut of corporate work. I ended up doing most of my work for a person who's no longer there, but he was chair of the corporate department. And so he had a lot of big clients that were involved in a lot of kind of very, very large transactions. And so, it was long hours and it was grueling, and but I learned a lot during that time. And so I think, from my perspective, and I'll say that over the course of my career and my different roles, I've hired many teams, in-house teams, and one of the things that I do look for is big law firm experience. Not because the experience translates into being a good in-house lawyer, but because it teaches you the stamina and the resilience and the persistence. It's the kind of training that you get, unfortunately, at some of these these intense places to work.
Yeah. And how did the opportunity to go in-house and join J.Crew, what did that look like?
Well, so I think it's really important to always stay open to different opportunities, even though all of us, I think, have an idea of our plan. I always planned to go in-house at an investment bank or a financial institution because that was who I was working with most of the time when I was at law firms. And then, to be honest, I had a friend who told me that she applied for a job at J.Crew as a lawyer and got turned down. I'm like, oh, I like J.Crew. I like their clothes. I like to shop.
Yeah.
Like, well, let me check it out. If it didn't work out for you, I'm sorry, but let me see.
Yeah.
And so was not even on my radar at all to do
Mm.
something like that, and applied, and their headquarters is in New York City. And as soon as I walked in, the office has clothes racks with clothes hanging everywhere. Catalog pages are up on every wall. They've got, a storefront where they mock up the stores. And so just going in as a consumer, as a shopper, as a woman who loved to wear J. Crew clothes,
Yeah.
I just was so excited. It was something that I could understand and touch and feel, and was so much more interesting to me. And I was just fortunate to actually get the job. And so I joined as assistant general counsel. I was the
Yeah.
second lawyer there. There was a general counsel there already. And after 1 year of being there, she left to become general counsel of Ann Taylor. And I was in the right place at the right time, and was given the opportunity to step into the general counsel role, which again would never have happened if I thought I was going to stay on my path of going in-house at an investment bank.
Yeah.
And so, was really lucky, and I did a lot of my learning on the job, and we took the company from 500 million to 1.5 billion. We
Wow.
went through the highly successful IPO, and actually that was an incredibly intensive experience. So for IPOs, really, you're working on it for like a year, and
Yeah.
all the stars and the sun and the moon all have to align to like make it happen. And at the time too, J. Crew did not have a permanent CFO in place. And so CFO is typically the person who in many companies will lead an IPO transaction. So again, I was super fortunate that I just got to play this very big outsized role as
Yeah.
general counsel. And so I had not been on that side. I had done IPOs from the law firm side, but it was an entirely different experience. And so I I loved it. I learned so much through that process. I would say, it was a year of my life where I was like working nonstop.
Yeah.
But afterwards, I wanted to really just get another IPO under my belt. And so
Yeah.
that's the reason why I eventually left J.Crew and I went to a high growth startup called Ideally,
Yeah.
which was in the flash sales space, and flash sales was really hot at the time.
Hmm.
And actually, Inc. magazine had named Ideally as the fastest growing private company in the US that year. And
Wow.
they wanted to go public. And I was like, great, this is my opportunity to try and do this again.
Yeah.
And joined. I was the first and only lawyer. And
Yeah.
so it gave me the experience of being really scrappy,
Hmm.
educating an organization about what the role and importance of legal and risk management are. I mean, I had the CEO's dog sitting behind my chair all the time. I mean, I could not find a stapler for like the first week. And I went from like this big, beautiful office at J.Crew with
Yeah.
a team that I had built and plenty of support to this. And so it was a culture shock for sure at first, and I love dogs.
Yeah.
And, I didn't need a stapler that badly, but I actually ended up loving the whole environment, the entrepreneurial spirit, the rolling up your sleeves and digging in and wearing many different hats. And so it was a great experience. I've got no regrets about moving from J. Crew to Ideally.
Yeah, and to talk more about your time at J.Crew, what was your involvement like in the IPO? What were some of the things you were doing and you were responsible for?
Well, it was kind of like soup to nuts. I mean, I was, along with other stakeholders at J.Crew, meeting with the stock exchanges to decide where we were going to list, meeting
Mm.
with bankers and deciding on investment banker selection for who was going to lead our IPO, choosing outside counsel, again, who was going to be our legal advisor for the IPO. And so ultimately, we went with Goldman and with Cleary Gottlieb, drafting the registration statement, the prospectus, spending, and this doesn't exist anymore, but spending many, many days and nights at the printer's offices, making changes to the registration statement, responding to SEC comments, and so kind of everything from beginning to end. And so I was able to get exposed to every facet of the
Mm.
process. And, it was new to me, being on the inside of a company, being able to do that because you don't have outside counsel do a lot of that.
Hmm.
And it was so interesting.
Yeah. And over your 10 years at J.Crew, where do you think you made the biggest impact on the company?
Um, Aside from the IPO, I would like to say it was really building a high performance team. And so when I became general counsel, I was the only one. And so I built the team, and it was a small team, but I built it really from the ground up.
Hmm.
And so I also took on the company's social responsibility program. And so I also had non legal professionals reporting to me too. And it was my first time building a team myself. And so I think, by the time I left, I feel like it was a really high performing in house team that really embraced being proactive, being a business partner at the table, having bias for action, all the traits that I think are really important
Hmm.
for a good in house lawyer to be. And so I feel like I was able to leave it in really good hands.
Yeah. And what were some foundational skills or lessons learned at J.Crew that helped you with your career moving forward?
Okay, great question. So I'm not sure. So when I was at J. Crew, I was there during three separate CEOs.
Mm.
The last one was Mickey Drexler, who is well known in the retail industry and is known as the Merchant Prince. And so I learned a lot from working for him for 7 years.
Wow.
He, first, I'll say one thing I learned as a practical skill is always respond to phone calls and emails immediately within an hour if you can, but definitely not more than a day, not more
Mm.
than same day. Mickey, in the 7 years that I worked for him, I think I could probably count on one hand the number of times that he did not respond to me in an email in more than 10 minutes.
Wow.
This included while he was on vacation, too. I have a memory of him actually. He was on a bike tour in Tuscany with his family, and I remember him calling me from the side of the road that he had pulled over to answer something that I had asked him by
Yeah.
email. And so it's something that I learned is so critically important because you have to move not just at the speed of business, but stay in front of the business, one or two steps ahead if you can. And so just got to move really quickly and be responsive. And so that was one
Hmm.
important practical life skill that I learned.
Yeah.
Another one that I learned actually from the CFO at J.Crew, who I later worked with at Equinox,
Hmm.
is that, as he said at the time, don't be a paragraph person in a bullet point world. So make sure your communications are concise and to the point. And so I learned from him to actually write and rewrite my communications, even if they were simple emails, to be as tight as possible and to actually speak to your audience. And so it was a huge skill in terms of just being able to communicate effectively.
Yeah. And what was your favorite part out working at J.Crew?
My favorite part of working at J.Crew?
Yeah.
Well, I love the work. I love the company, but I also really love the clothes. And
Yeah.
so it might have been the discount on clothes, I hate to say, but
Yeah.
that was definitely great. Um, we also, while I was there, started Madewell.
Mm.
And so that was really exciting too. And I
Yeah.
really enjoyed actually, seeing a brand be born.
Yeah.
And now, Madewell is doing very well for itself.
Yeah. And then how did you transition from ideally to,
So ideally, we unfortunately had plans to take the company public, did not pan out. The flash sale space imploded at the time, and we ended up selling the company to Groupon. The
mm,
CEO of Ideally was one of the early Amazon employees, so we would always have these conversations about Amazon. I was always fascinated by Amazon.
yeah.
And so when we were actually selling Ideally, the CEO actually just said, "Oh, I'm going to reach out to my colleague at Amazon and tell them about you."
Hmm.
And one thing led to another. And again, right place, right time, and just kind of being open to how things can happen and take twists and turns that you
Yeah.
don't expect. And so I, I stayed through the sale of Ideally to Groupon, and then an opportunity was given to me to join Amazon. And so I did. And
Yeah.
so again, a huge shift. But what I'll say is, one of the things that I think I really has been important to me through my career is, I've been at startups, I've been at Fortune 500 companies, I've been at Amazon. Like I said, I've been, working in an office with the CEO's dog that sat behind me in his crate all the time. So I've been in so many different environments. I've worked with VCs, I've worked with private equity quite a bit.
Hmm.
Um, I've been part of public environments and private. Um, One theme that kind of runs throughout is transformations. I'm really attracted to companies in transformation, high
Mm.
risk, high reward.
Yeah.
So that's been one theme. But I think it's really important, or at least it has been for me, to get all of these different experiences. And I think it's helped me build my toolkit or my backpack with
Yeah.
different skills and experiences that just makes me more well-rounded
Hmm.
as a leader.
Yeah. And what was it like going from a smaller online retailer to one of the largest in the world at Amazon?
Yes, huge shock. So,
Yeah.
yeah, going from Ideally, where like I was hearing the CEO's dog bark all the time, and I was wearing 10 different hats and kind of running around doing everything.
Yeah.
And going to Amazon, where, the size of the in-house legal team at that time was globally 1,000. So
Wow.
I went from being the only lawyer to being one of 1,000. And just the sheer size and scale of the Amazon business and the soft lines business that I support,
Hmm.
there were so many layers of approval and bureaucracy. Every decision that would be made that could potentially impact the business just because of the sheer scale of it
Yeah.
had to be, vetted 1,000 times. Um, and so it was very different. And, I love the innovative part of Amazon. And you're always living in that gray area of kind of like pushing the envelope, in law and business and technology,
Hmm.
and operating at such a massive scale.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I did find more frustrating for me was actually having so many layers and so
Mm.
much bureaucracy and having to work through. It was difficult to make an immediate impact. And
Mm.
so I was there for 4 years, and I was living in New Jersey at the time. I had young children, but my
Hmm.
business team was in Seattle, so I was flying all the time to Seattle. Somehow, always ending up in the middle seat in the
Yeah.
airplane too. And I think by the time a former Amazon colleague went on to become CEO of Full Beauty,
Mm.
she ended up calling me and asking me to join her at Full Beauty.
Yeah.
And by that time, I think that I was really kind of worn down by the travel and frustrated by just all the bureaucracy at Amazon. And still, it really wasn't an easy decision, but I decided to leave and join her at Full Beauty.
Yeah. And at Full Beauty, what was the difference in having a larger role like chief legal officer?
So for me, and I can't speak for other people, but for me, my roles as general counsel and chief legal officer have always had the same scope of responsibilities, and I've always approached it in the same way. So you have
Mm.
responsibility from end to end for all of the company's operations. So from commercial work to contracting to litigation, employment, IP, marketing and advertising, regulatory compliance. In public companies, of course, there's securities work, investor relations work, et cetera. And so
Mm.
I've always approached it the same way. I've always approached it as having purview over, the end-to-end legal matters for the organization, but also just being a legal and risk management leader within the organization that is responsible, across the entire organization, not just, the strictly legal aspects.
Hmm. And what were some of your favorite initiatives or projects at Full Beauty?
So at Full Beauty, from the time that I joined, the company went through a full comprehensive financial restructuring.
Wow.
So I stepped foot in there, and we were moving headlong into a financial restructuring. So that was also a new experience for me. So at J.Crew, I went through an IPO. At Ideally, I went through a sale of the company. At Amazon, in my first role at Amazon, before I had the soft lines role, we actually closed the business that I was part of. It was called Quidsi, which was directly
Mm.
competitive with the Amazon family business. So we closed the business, and then yet another tool that I gained at Full Beauty. It's a new experience is to go through a bankruptcy process. So
Mm.
we took the company through a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and actually, at the time, it was the fastest Chapter 11 bankruptcy in history. It was
Wow.
24 hours in and out, and so it's kind of this dubious honor, but and the record has since been beaten. But I think that was also, experience for me where I learned a ton. I gained skills about restructuring that I'd never had before, and then we were able to do this very swiftly for the company, and the company emerged the other side of the Chapter 11 and has been doing really well since then.
And what did those like 24 hours like kind of look like? What was like some of like the processes and things like that?
So it's actually an enormous amount of work and weeks of work that go into it. The
Hmm.
24-hour period is just from the actual filing of a Chapter 11 proceeding with the bankruptcy
Hmm.
court, and when the court actually approves the company's restructuring plan.
Uh,
So, so typically it could last several months or years even.
hmm.
And in our case, we were able to get all of the company's creditors to agree to our restructuring plan at the outset.
Hmm.
So when
Yeah.
we actually filed for Chapter 11, we were already poised for approval, and you just need the
Yeah.
court to approve.
And then what led to you going to Bed Bath and Beyond, and what did your role look like there?
So at Full Beauty, when the company came out of its restructuring, it
Hmm.
had new private equity owners and it had a new CEO who hired a new management team.
Mm.
I was still there along with the head of HR, but the entire environment and company strategy had changed around me. And
Yeah.
so it had become one that was not what I had signed on to when I
Mm.
started. And so somebody reached out to me about the Bed Bath opportunity, Fortune 500 public company, a brand that I knew and loved and
Yeah.
was a consumer of. And so you can sense this theme. I kept going to brand first companies that I knew and I could
Yeah.
understand their product. And so I jumped at that opportunity. It was another massive transformation that sounded really exciting and was a great opportunity for me.
And now, as we move on to the third part of the podcast, talking about your most recent role as Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer at Equinox, how did that opportunity come about? And what were your main responsibilities as the Chief Legal Officer? Like, what did you cover and stuff?
Okay, great question. So that came to me through a headhunter. So a headhunter reached
Mm.
out to me and asked me if I would be interested in Equinox. And of course, another brand that I've always admired. I mean, in fact, I think Amazon, of all the companies I've been with the exception of Amazon, Equinox has such an incredible brand, a global
Hmm.
brand. Even though it's a company that's not even in every country, it's the brand strength is
Hmm.
so much larger than the size of the business. And so I was not even an Equinox member, but
Yeah.
what really appealed to me and I found interesting was that was Equinox's strategy for becoming a fitness, health, wellness, and longevity ecosystem.
Mm.
And they had their fitness clubs, of course, but they also had hotels.
Mm.
There's one in New York City, and they've got high growth plans to open more globally. They have a spa business and they have a retail apparel business. And I loved the concept of what they were building and this idea of luxury high performance, which
Hmm.
is, what their mission really rallies around.
Hmm.
And so, I just thought it would be a really great opportunity to be part of that story and another transformation also.
What were like your main responsibilities there? Like what would you do on like a day to day, for example?
Just change every single day. So when I joined, and this is a little bit of a theme with me, but when I joined, there was a 10-person legal team. Most of them had actually left. This was, shortly after the pandemic, which was a really tough time. All the business was basically closed, and so I think going through that, a lot of the team had left. So I rebuilt the team. Me and my team were responsible for all the end-to-end
Hmm.
legal and regulatory compliance matters for all of Equinox's business. So the fitness clubs, the hotel business, the retail business, the spa business, and also Equinox owns SoulCycle, and
Mm.
they used to own Blink Fitness too. And so responsible for their businesses too. I was also responsible for risk management, which was more of the insurance aspects, the insurance program of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, it was very similar to my prior roles, just end-to-end responsibility. But
Yeah.
what I just have always enjoyed the most about my general counsel or CLO roles is, it's never just legal. It's
Mm.
always, being a strategic thought partner, being a business partner, being a, um, partner at the table along with all your other colleagues. And so I was there only for 1 year.
Yeah.
Basically, it's an amazing company and an incredibly strong brand. But I had actually completed my mandate. I had
Mm.
rebuilt the entire team, the entire legal and risk management team. I transformed the function from a more reactive function that was slow to support the business to one that really leaned in as a proactive business partner and strategic thought partner. So changed the whole way that the team and the function operated, put in a lot of processes and controls, cut the volume of litigation significantly because they had a big litigation issue,
Mm.
and um, and so I felt like I had completed my mandate and the reasons why I joined and what I'd set out to do,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just a tumultuous time. There were four C-suite executives who left in the few months before I decided to leave, and
Yeah.
so I was taking on more and more roles, and then. When I had kind of completed the work that I had set out to do, I
Mm-hmm.
decided to make a kind of a long planned pivot to do something different.
Yeah. And now that you have left Equinox, what are you planning on doing on in the future? Are you looking for like another full-time job, or are you joining any like advisory boards or?
So for now, I am doing some legal advisory work
Mm.
for growth stage companies and also companies in transformation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm considering board roles and I'm doing some nonprofit work.
Nice. And over your time as chief legal officer, what traits make someone especially successful in this type of role?
Okay. So I think it really requires a few different things. Having balanced judgment, especially when it comes to risk,
Mm-hmm.
is really important because businesses do not want their chief legal officers or their general counsels to be very risk averse. There's always that balance. And
Mm-hmm.
so, how do you do that in a way that is commercial and makes sense, but still protect the company? Being resilient, that's important in any role as a leader, and so especially for companies in transformation,
Mm-hmm.
being resilient and being able to kind of strap on the seatbelt um, and be a steady guiding hand
Yeah.
through turbulent waters. That's really important too. And then I think also just being kind of authentic and respectful and kind and collaborative. I think those are really important traits too
Mm-hmm.
for any leader as well as a CLO.
Yeah, and as we move on to the fourth part of the podcast, talking about challenges and overcoming obstacles, being an Asian American in leadership comes with its own sets of challenges. What were some of the obstacles you may have faced due to your background?
So Ben, I want to ask you, do you hear similar to the question of what was important growing up during your childhood? What values did
Mm-hmm.
your upbringing instill? Do you hear a lot of the same themes?
First, some people talk about how like it was hard for them to maybe stay silent, and maybe there were like comments about how maybe someone who with an Asian background was more silent, even if they still have the same like skill sets, they would be put as like silent, and maybe they can't handle as big of a responsibility. But it's also been like a mix. Like some people have faced certain obstacles as an Asian American in these larger leadership roles, but some haven't. So I was just wondering what your perspective was on that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm curious about other people, but I there have always been there's always been unconscious bias and microaggressions, kind of the
Mm-hmm.
assumption that Asians are the stereotype that Asians are quiet, that they will just put their heads down and work hard, that they won't rock the boat. I mean, frankly, these are all things that were instilled in me when I was brought up, and I'm sure many other
Mm-hmm.
Asians, which is put your head down, work hard, don't rock the boat, be humble, you know, listen more than you speak. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'll say that to this day, through my whole career and to this day, those are things that I still have to actively work against when I'm, you know, in my roles, doing my job, because those are deeply ingrained. But I've never experienced overt racism in any respect. And I've been fortunate in that way because I'm sure many people have. I've
Mm-hmm.
probably experienced more incidents relating to me as a woman than as an Asian American. So, you know, at a law firm, actually just walking into a meeting with clients, having them assume that I'm the secretary and asking me to get them coffee and things like that. I mean, those things happen,
Mm-hmm.
and but less so, more so about me being a woman than an Asian.
Mm-hmm. And adding on to that, like what role has your cultural background played in shaping your leadership style and perspective as a business leader, and how have you found ways to use it as a strength in your career?
So again, you know what I was just saying is. You know, I was taught to put my head down, to be quiet, to not challenge authority,
Mm-hmm.
to not toot my own horn. And so those are things that are difficult qualities for a business leader. And so what I have learned over time is how to actually use my voice and amplify other people's voices. And the thing that really actually, it's a piece of personal advice that was given to me at one point that
Mm-hmm.
really helped shape my perspective on how to be able to do these things is I was asked at one point to speak in front of a very, very large audience as a keynote speaker. And I was like, no, no, you know, humble. No, I don't want to do
Yeah.
it. You know, I don't want to speak in front of that many people. I don't, you know, thank you for the honor. And this person said to me, don't do it for yourself. Do it for all the others who will come behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And it completely shifted my perspective on how I look at things. So now when I'm in a meeting and I do speak up or use my voice or ask for something, even if it's like, you know, personal, like a, you know, promotion or raise or something like that, things that I think are typically difficult for most Asians to do,
Mm-hmm.
I always think of it in the respect of, well, you know, if we don't do this now and help pave the way for those who are coming behind us, then it's not going to change. And so it has always made it much easier for me to look at things through this different lens.
Yeah. And as we move on to the final part of the podcast, talking about advice and inspiration, what's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Um, Less so business advice and more so just personal advice. It was probably that.
Mm.
It was really kind of eye-opening for me
Yeah.
because when you're doing something difficult because it will help others and help lift others up, it
Mm-hmm.
becomes a lot easier to do than when you're doing it for yourself or you're only thinking through your own lens.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was probably the best piece of not as much business but personal advice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think best piece of business advice, probably not the best, but you know, going back to not being a paragraph guy in a bullet point world of like,
Yeah.
which lawyers tend to do, talk on and on because most lawyers get paid by the minute,
Yeah.
is just be a concise, effective communicator.
Mm-hmm. And how do you stay motivated, especially when things aren't going your way or you're facing high pressure moments in your workplace?
So in my career, I've actually sought out a lot of high pressure environments.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the type of person who actually thrives under adversity and
Yeah.
pressure. But it's not that I don't get unmotivated sometimes because I do. And so I think one of the things that I find helpful is to just take a step back and think, that really what you're going through, as difficult as it is you just want to take out of it what you want to learn. Take out of it what you want to take away, and then you're going to move on to something else. And so there are very few things that are going to last forever, whether or not it's like a really difficult class in school, or you're in a situation in a job where you're working with a very difficult boss or in an incredibly intensive project. Just look at it from the lens of you really just want to take from it what you want to learn, what you want to put in your backpack, and then move on to the next thing. So it's not motivating you to work harder or keep going, but actually just motivating you to put it in a little bit more perspective of you're just there to take what you can out of that experience. So does it teach you that you don't want to do a certain type of work anymore, that you don't want to spend your career in a certain area, that you don't want to work with a certain type of personality? And so when you look at it through that lens and take a step back a little bit, sometimes it makes it easier to move through.
Yeah, definitely. And how do you define success now, and how has that definition changed since the beginning of your career?
Okay. So probably like many people, at the beginning of my career, success to me was, my title, the the name and the reputation of the company that I worked for, how much money I made, how big of a team I was able to lead, and then that has most definitely evolved over time. And I would say really now it's more about, did I make an impact? First and foremost, did I make a positive impact in the way that I wanted to? Did I, as a manager and a leader, did I develop and nurture other people in their careers? And did I enjoy working with the people in an environment that I'm in? So, as I'm sure you've heard, nobody says on their deathbed that I wish I worked harder. And so it's really just about being fulfilled, being with the people that you're working with in an environment that you're working in, and the product or services that you're working with.
Well, thank you so much for being on the Aim High podcast today. I really enjoyed talking to you, all the great pieces of advice, and just your journey as becoming a lawyer and being a chief legal officer. It was really enjoyed our conversation. So thank you so much.
Well, Ben, thank you. And before you go, I really just wanted to ask you, so you've spoken with so many leaders. What is some of the best advice that you've heard from others?
Let me think.
Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, of course. One piece of advice that I really liked was by Diane Gatua, and she said, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So when you are prepared and you have done the work and opportunities show up, that combination is when you can really succeed and thrive.
Okay, well, I like that.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben.